white farmers, descendants of pioneers who had snatched the African bush with plow and fence, found their world unraveling under the relentless onslaught of ZANLA and ZIPRA guerrillas infiltrating from Mozambique and Zambia. These were not abstract battles fought in distant jungles. They were intimate horrors that shattered families, scorched livelihoods, and hollowed out the soul of rural life. What follows is a tapestry of their stories, drawn from the raw accounts of those who endured, pinpointing the raids, arsons, executions, and ambushes that turned fertile lands into killing fields. These were the guerrilla war's cruel calculus: terrorize the settlers, cripple their economy, and force a reckoning with the regime they propped up. It began with a whisper of wind through the mayambo trees, but for Robert and Dorothea Matthews, owners of Altina Farm, a sprawling tobacco estate 30 kilometers west of Mount Darwin, the true storm broke at 3 a.m. 10 ZANLA guerrillas, led by the battle-hardened Rex Nongo, had slipped across the border from Mozambique months earlier, their AK-47s slung low, packs heavy with Soviet-supplied grenades and at least one RPD light machine gun. They moved like ghosts, cutting the farm's telephone lines first to isolate their prey, then laying an anti-vehicle landmine in the gravel driveway as a grim welcome for any dawn rescuers. The homestead, a modest brick house fortified with little more than faith and family photos, erupted in chaos. The guerrillas unleashed a fusillade, each man emptying at least two 30-round magazines into the walls before hurling hand grenades through shattered windows. Shrapnel tore through the air like vengeful hornets. Robert, a sturdy man in his 40s who had sunk his life savings into curing barns brimming with golden leaf, bolted upright in bed, grabbing his shotgun. Dorothea, his wife of 2 decades, clutched their sleeping children. But the onslaught was merciless. Bullets riddled the master bedroom, and a grenade blast claimed Robert instantly, his body crumpling amid the splintered furniture. Dorothea, shielding her youngest, took the full force of another explosion. She lingered just long enough to whisper farewells before succumbing to her wounds. Their guest, Mark de Borchgrave, a Belgian mining engineer visiting for the holidays, barricaded himself with the children in an inner room. 8-year-old Jane de Borchgrave caught a grazing fragment in the arm, the sole survivor among the adults, while the guerrillas, mistaking a farm store for a Rhodesian outpost, doused it in petrol and set it ablaze. Flames licked the night sky as the attackers melted back into the bush, their parting gift a booby-trapped mine that Rhodesian sappers later disarmed. The Matthews children, orphaned in an instant, were bundled off to relatives in Salisbury, their farm reduced to smoldering ruins and economic ruin. Tobacco, Rhodesia's lifeblood export worth over 30% of foreign revenue, lay rotting in the fields, a deliberate gut punch to the war machine. This raid, the war's brutal overture, signaled to every farmer: no border, no wall, could keep the shadows at bay. By the mid-1970s, the guerrilla calculus had sharpened. Strike at the heart of white prosperity. Tobacco barns, those towering wooden sentinels filled with drying leaves during August to October harvest, became pyres of sabotage. In the misty highlands near Nyanga, Barbara, a resilient widow managing her late husband's estate, faced the inferno not once, but in a crescendo of coordinated arsons that left her tallying losses like wounds. 6 landmines detonated under irrigation pumps for direct assaults on the homestead, fields of maize reduced to char, and seedbeds obliterated in midnight blasts. One curing season night in 1977, as the air hung thick with the earthy scent of fermenting leaf, ZANLA cadres crept through the perimeter fence, their matches flickering like fireflies of doom. They doused the barns in kerosene, structures packed floor to ceiling with bales worth tens of thousands of pounds, then touched flame to the wick. The blaze roared to life, a 40-foot wall of orange fury that consumed an entire harvest in hours. the acrid smoke choking the valley and drawing horrified farmhands from their compounds. Barbara, roused by the glow, fired warning shots from her homestead porch, her voice steady over the crackle. "We've lost it all again." But the guerrillas had vanished, leaving behind barbed wire tangles and a government subsidy check for feudal security upgrades, watchtowers and patrols that stretched thin across 5,500 isolated farms. Her neighbor in the Melsetter district fared no better. In a 1978 spree, barns across the plateau went up like tinder, forcing fruit and vegetable haulers to halt runs to Umtalai after 2 or 3 ambushes. A week turned roads into roulette. These weren't random. They were economic warfare, designed to bleed the settler state dry. Barbara stayed, patching roofs and replanting, but the psychological scar festered. Every rustle in the night evoked the whoosh of flames, a reminder that prosperity was as fragile as the leaf itself. For the black farm workers caught in the crosshairs, loyal hands who plowed, dipped cattle, and harvested under white overseers, the terror was existential. Guerrillas demanded allegiance, executing sellouts to cow the rest, while farmers, desperate for labor, armed them against the insurgents. The result? Compounds turned charnel houses, where families paid for divided loyalties. On July 2, 1978, at Mayo Ranch, a vast cattle spread 135 miles east of Salisbury, 25 ZANLA fighters descended after dusk, their RPGs first cratering the main farmhouse in a bid to flush out the owner. He escaped, but the raiders pivoted to the labor lines, grass huts sheltering 100 souls. "Out! Leave this place!" they barked in Shona, herding men, women, and children into the open under machine gun muzzles. Then the reversal. Back inside now, as families scrambled in confusion, petrol-soaked rags ignited, and automatic fire chewed through the walls. 14 died in the inferno, a 55-year-old foreman shot in the back at point-blank range, 7 men crumpled mid-flight, a woman and 5 children asphyxiated in the smoke. 3 survivors crawled from the wreckage, one a father clutching his teenage son, who'd hidden under a bed. The owner, watching from afar, lost not just workers but the illusion of protection. Recruitment now meant trucking in strangers from hundreds of miles away, their eyes hollow with fear. A year earlier, on August 21, 1977, 17 miles north of Umtalai at Odzanu Junction Farm, the pattern repeated with medieval brutality. ZANLA cadres, fresh from Mozambique, torched the workers' thatched homes after a failed homestead raid, gunning down 16 men, women, and children in a hail that left bodies twisted amid the ashes. One survivor, a young herder, recounted the guerrillas' chant, "Traitors to the revolution." The farm's white manager, barricaded inside, heard the screams fade into crackling flames, his authority evaporating as surviving hands fled to guerrilla-protected villages. These killings weren't collateral. They were messages, etched in blood, that no fence could safeguard the human chain holding the farms together. Rural roads, lifelines to markets, kin, and sanity, became death traps, mined and manned by guerrillas who knew every bend in Manicaland and Mashonaland. Pickups laden with wives, children, and supplies rattled over gravel, only to meet crossfire or buried doom. In January 1973, 3 government land inspectors, routine travelers on a northeastern track, hit an ambush near Centenary. ZANLA fighters, hidden in the thorn scrub, raked their vehicle with AK fire. 2 whites died instantly, slumped over the wheel, while the third was dragged away, his fate a whispered rumor in Salisbury bars. It was an early jolt presaging the mine plague. By 1975, a dozen white families had been maimed or slain on routes like the one to Umtalai, where explosives shredded tires and lives alike. The toll mounted. On a dusty stretch between Namaropa and Ruangwe in 1978, 20-year-old Russ Lieberman, a young farmer on attachment with the security forces, piloted his pickup toward home. Guerrillas sprung the trap. A landmine flipped the vehicle, followed by a storm of bullets. Russ bled out alone, his body recovered hours later by a patrol, leaving his parents to bury a son who'd only just claimed his inheritance. Worse came in December 1979, Beatrice District, where a father's routine errand ended in atrocity. Don, a local guard farmer fresh from tracking a gang 25 kilometers through the bush, heard the news. His neighbor and the man's 16-year-old son, ambushed en route to town, riddled with fire from concealed positions. The boy, clutching a rifle his father had taught him to load, never fired a shot. In Merciless, whispers told of a daylight ambush on a convoy of farmers, 2 vehicles shredded, families scattering into the veldt, that broke the district's tight-knit spirit, turning communal braais into ghost gatherings. These ambushes forced adaptations. FN rifles bolted to dashboards, radios crackling with convoy calls, children schooled in armored buses. Yet the risk lingered, a constant calculus of when, not if. By 1979, dozens lay in unmarked graves, their trucks rusting memorials to a war that devoured the ordinary. In the end, these horrors, grenades shattering sleep, barns blooming into bonfires, compounds reeking of charred flesh, roads spitting shrapnel, did their work. Farms emptied, subsidies strained, and the white yeomanry, once the regime's backbone, fled or fortified into fortresses of sandbags and steel. The guerrillas' terror, precise and pitiless, hastened the fall of Rhodesia, but at a cost etched in the survivors' eyes. A generation scarred, whispering of nights when the bush itself seemed to howl for blood.